So I forgot to talk about this last night on the live stream show because I started it a lot later than normal and because I was tired from the gym. I think it's important that I talk about this because this has a lot to do with finance, investing, the economy, rule of law, and, learning to do research and just trusting that your research is good. And so over the weekend, Axios released this interview with Elon Musk that aired on HBO. And during the interview, Elon Musk admitted that earlier in 2018, Tesla Motors was actually weeks away from bankruptcy. And the reason this is important, in my opinion, is because, number one, it's not reflected in the stock price really, but number two, and this is more important in my opinion, it's not listed anywhere in any of their required filings. So if you go to Tesla's SEC filings, their 8Ks, their 10Qs, none of this is mentioned. It's all hunky-dory, it's all spin, it's all accounting gimmickry. They're all in on fraud. It's really sad. It's really sad that it's come to this. So, Dave Kranzler has a really excellent article highlighting all the crazy stuff that Tesla, the accounting tricks that Tesla has been doing. It's in the Wall Street. The article's in the Wall Street for Main Street Facebook group. He released it on November 15th, and it's called Tesla's Q3 GAAP Net Income, in quotes, Manipulation, if not outright fraud. And so, Tesla's been claiming that they occasionally have been profitable, generating free cash flow. And there's just so much, there's so much bullshit here. There's so much lying. Elon Musk was on Twitter. This is going to be a very short video because I forgot to cover this yesterday. Elon Musk is on Twitter telling people that they need to generate more sales, that they can go, if they order a Tesla, they can get their car fast, when he's claiming, and his company is claiming, that Tesla has 300,000 cars on back order. Okay? Why is he on Twitter promoting that people can get their car immediately, they don't have to take a test drive, they can get their car quickly, if he has a 300,000 car back order? Okay, it doesn't make sense. Silver Report Uncut. I'm not familiar, STC Golf, with their channel. But, and the even funnier, crazier thing is, after this interview came out, guys, the Tesla stock is up. in this dystopian new normal that we live in, where people in Silicon Valley and momentum traders and people who think that Elon Musk is going to save the planet, they didn't care. They viewed that, Tesla survived. So that's good. That's a good sign. It got spun. That, they could have gone bankrupt. Well, why didn't they disclose any of this? It's not in any of their financials. They didn't put in any of their press releases. They didn't put in any of their SEC filings. Really messed up. So, this week, Tesla stock went from, when that interview initially aired, I think the stock went down to around 325 share. Now it's back up to 341. So the news coming out did absolutely nothing negative. Looks like, in fact, that shorts panicked because someone came in and maybe manipulated the stock, God knows who. And there was a short squeeze rally. Jeffrey Gotts, the back orders for Model 3. I know a bunch of shorts that do excellent research that say there is no backlog at all. That say they pulled all the demand forward, that there's no backlog whatsoever, that he's taking cash on deposits for the pickup truck, for the big rig truck, those electric models, and the Tesla Roadster, and he's going to take a long time to deliver those. You can't stop Tesla because it is supported by globalists. You may be right about that. Well, it's supported by the Silicon Valley billionaire guys. The really big money. Wall Street has a lot invested in it. Some of the investment banks on Wall Street were actually the ones who were giving Elon Musk loans against his shares. So he has big margin calls if the Tesla stock falls. So it's actually in his incentive to manipulate the stock higher at any cost. And I think that's what you've seen. You've seen Elon Musk, the board of directors who are his yes men, the new chief financial officer willing to do or say anything to move the stock price higher. And there's reasons for that, because the convertible debentures are coming. They don't want to take their cash, what little cash they have left. By the way, they claim to have all this cash on their balance sheet, but they have enormous accounts payable due. So they've been delaying that. Okay, and their excuse for their accounts receivable was BS too, if you read Dave Kranzler and other Tesla bearers' articles. And yet the stock price is higher. Well, actually, there's going to be tons of other electric cars. Jeffrey, there's going to be tons and tons of other electric cars. The amount of competition coming, so even if you don't believe all the evidence that the shorts have issued, and there's tons of details that there's accounting fraud at Tesla, that Elon's willing to do or say anything to keep the stock price higher, that even if you don't believe any of that, the amount of competition coming from the regular car companies that can subsidize their electric cars with profits, with stable revenues from regular cars, is enormous over the next couple years. The competition is going to, whatever margins Tesla has, and they're not consistent free cash flow, they're not consistent high net profit margins. Those margins are going to be totally eroded away by competition over the next couple years. Even if the competitors don't really succeed. And you know what? From what I'm hearing on the reviews, the couple Audi models of their electric vehicles have really good reviews, better than Tesla's recent reviews. The new Jaguar, one in Europe, the electric car has good reviews. And I can guarantee you Mercedes and BMW over the next couple years are going to put out really solid electric vehicles. Well, that's how capitalism works, Jeffrey. If we have any type of free markets or competition at all, even tiny amounts of it, that capitalism is naturally deflationary. So if you have a market leader and Tesla doesn't have outstanding intellectual property, it's been proven, there's tons of analysts out there saying that they don't have the best autonomous vehicle or autopilot or any of that stuff. And so they don't really have a moat. They're not like other industries where they're a market leader and they can defend their moat. So they're those types of industries in general, the market leader, people see them and they go after the competition. The competition goes after the market leader, and that slowly erodes away market share. That slowly erodes away the lead that the leader has. The most profits, the best margins. Capitalism is actually naturally deflationary. It's more the last vestiges of capitalism that we have, like real free markets here in the global economy, are mostly like in flat screen TVs, laptops, Moore's law with semiconductors. And look at those. Over time, you've gotten higher and higher quality flat screen TVs at a lower price. I remember like 20 years ago when I was like a little kid and a teenager, and I was going to Costco and I would see like those tiny little plasma TVs, and it was like $5,000 for a tiny little plasma TV or a computer screen. And so now, no one wants those. You can get a giant like QLED flat screen TV that's like 50 inches for like $500 In the past, you never could have gotten anything like that. So that's what some of the last vestiges of capitalism and free markets. And so over Tesla, no matter what you think about Tesla in the short term, all the Tesla bulls are not talking about the competition that's coming, and they don't have any defensible things right now. They just don't. There's going to be higher quality electric vehicles coming, and those other companies, those car companies, have an advantage with dealerships, and it's going to be a lot easier for service, because if you check on Twitter, there's thousands of complaints from Tesla about servicing vehicles and other stuff. Thousands of complaints for vehicles that Tesla screwed up, either manufacturing or cars that break down or bad paint jobs. Azra, you really think that Apple or Google would risk the money to buy Tesla? I don't know, man. If the government maybe gave like a interest-free loan, maybe some type of bailout. I mean, right now, at one point, Tesla's market cap was more than General Motors. And General Motors is producing, 10 times as many cars? And General Motors has to... I know they were bailed out, but overall, General Motors has to cut their cars that don't make them any money. So, this is... If you're short Tesla, I know a lot of people are short Tesla, but, ultimately, if we do have rule of law in this country... I think Tesla is probably the financial people I talk to with 10, 20, 30 years of experience in the financial industry and markets, who are objective, who are not like financing some of Tesla's deals, they are like adamantly like they won't touch Tesla with a 10-foot pole being long that stock. And, I think, unfortunately, guys, that we're in a new normal now, and this sucks, that basically if Enron had occurred 8 to 10 years later, I'm not sure if Kenneth Lay and Jeffrey Skilling would have went to prison. That's how crazy everything is right now. I'm not sure if the people who committed that fraud at Enron, if they had waited like 8 to 10 years to start the fraud and were doing it now, it was getting worse now with everything in place now, with how like messed up the rule of law is and justice system, I'm not sure if the executives at Enron would be in jail and charged. So Elon, not only has he sold like the Silicon Valley people who are protecting him, and there's tons of gullible Tesla long investors who don't understand like the real accounting problems that's going on with the company, but he's also not a victim of circumstance. He's a benefactor of circumstance. He's benefited from the time period he's in where there's essentially lawlessness, the lack of rule of law, the obvious appearance of a never before seen banana republic with nuclear weapons, the world reserve currency, a massive welfare warfare state, etc. Okay, so I just wanted to touch on the Tesla stuff. I mean, I could go, there's just tons and tons of examples of like fraudulent stuff. That stuff should have been disclosed in his financials. Yes, I agree, Miser. The car industry in general is a nightmare. And if Tesla's kind of has a valuation as a tech company, that's the claim. Because if it was a car company, it wouldn't be getting the valuation it is. Well, actually, Azra, I think if they had a much lower market cap, if it was like 80% lower, if it was like $10 billion, it would be more reasonable, because there is a market out there for luxury electric vehicles for rich Silicon Valley guys who can put in their garage next to their Porsches or Ferraris. So they have their expensive gas guzzler cars, and then they have their Tesla Roadster or fancy Tesla cars. Elon might be in jail before he gets a chance to go to Mars. We'll see, though. The amount of fraud. Look, and none of the filings indicated any of this stuff that Elon Musk admitted in the Axios interview, and the stock went up. The stock actually went up after the interview got released. So I know shorts that are just totally puzzled, that are like, what the hell is going on here? None of this stuff makes any sense. Okay, so I wanted to just give you guys that. I forgot to mention also that in the cryptocurrency markets, that Mark Yusko and Mike Novogratz, who are institutional investors, also Patrick Byrne, think that in Q1 or Q2 of next year, they think that a lot more institutional money is planning on going into Bitcoin and some of the larger cryptocurrencies, and that will start another crypto rally. So we'll see if they're right. We'll see if they're just pumpers. I know Mark Yusko, besides actually managing money as an investor, and he called the stock market correction or crash a couple months ago, but he also said, he also started a crypto fund, I think a cryptocurrency ETF. It's an index fund, but you have to have $50,000 minimum. So it's mostly for hedge funds and institutions, and then you get exposure to a basket of crypto, I think 10 cryptos. So we'll see if those guys end up being right. I don't know. Maybe they're just lying and talking their book, because sometimes these guys are really, you can tell they're really smart and they have a good track record, but sometimes they'll just lie their ass off. There's a lot of pumpers in pretty much every industry. One of my listeners mentioned Marin Katusa, talking about how good he is at, picking out energy stocks, engineer resource companies. I mean, that guy, he doesn't disclose a lot of his problems. Let's just say he's definitely a pumper. And his relationships, he's involved with some very immoral people, including Frank Giustra. If you're not familiar with him, Clinton Foundation, best friends with the Clintons, Uranium One. I could go on and on down the list. Giustra is a good businessman, good investor, but he's like one of those immoral libertarian. He claims to be libertarian. I don't think he's really libertarian. He was actually supposed to come on a podcast interview like 3 or 4 years ago, but then I interviewed Charles Ortel, and him and his people found out, and he wouldn't even speak to me again. And that was actually before I found out Charles Ortel was starting to look into the Clinton Foundation and charity fraud. Charles Ortel, at that time when I was friends with him, was just going through accounting fraud with the like General Motors, General Electric, the large Wall Street banks, etc. Okay, so I brought that up. Last couple things here. So Jack Ma news. So this week, in one of the Chinese newspapers, Jack Ma, the founder and CEO, well, he might be stepping down, of Alibaba, he got outed as a Chinese Communist Party member. And if you're a Real Vision TV subscriber, that's interesting, because that's basically something that Miles Kwok, the estranged Chinese billionaire who the Chinese government supposedly has a price on his head. They want him like kidnapped and returned to China, or they want him killed. And he said in his Real Vision television interview with Kyle Bass, he made some very interesting and also very bold and strange predictions about Jack Ma over the next year or two. So if it seems that Miles Kwok, he's adding credibility, because he said, basically that Jack Ma was in the CCP and he was taking marching orders from the people running the Chinese government. So it's kind of interesting that Jack Ma just got outed. Meanwhile, there's been rumors and actual proof. Francine McKenna wrote an article, I think in August, about Alibaba, how they do massive amounts of accounting fraud. Now that stock hasn't crashed yet, but we'll see. But Miles Kwok said that the elites, the political elites in China running their government, he said there's like a dozen families, and they're like uncles and brothers and sons and grandsons and crony friends that like all get like benefits from that financially with corruption and stuff, that they want to take over Alibaba and force Jack Ma out. So we'll see if that ends up becoming true. But, some of the stuff Miles Kwok already predicted is already happening this week. If we were living in a fair, just world with rule of law, Elon Musk would have probably, the SEC, instead of not wanting to hurt the company, the SEC would have done major damage, but the SEC just doesn't want to be blamed. So this thing will go on. It could go on for a while. But I think in the near term, over the next couple months, Tesla does not have the cash on its balance sheet that they claim. And so they're going to have to do a capital raise. So the stock's at $341 per share. I believe he needs it up to like $360 or $365. So the convertible debt can be converted to equity, so he doesn't have to make large cash payments. So I think he has some very large, hundreds of millions of dollars in debt payments due in March from the Solar City debt that he took on when he used billions of dollars in shareholder capital to buy Solar City and bail out his cousins from going bankrupt and going to prison. So I could see the stock being, for whatever reason, mostly manipulated higher temporarily for the next couple months, just so that way Tesla Motors can do that deal, like I said, to raise cash and do either an equity dilution or make sure that they don't have to make the bond payment, so the bonds convert to equity, and then, after the stock's diluted and the money's raised, he can let the share price fall. The other story I wanted to talk about that I forgot to talk about yesterday was the Pentagon fails its first audit and the neocons demand more spending. So this is by Ron Paul on the Ron Paul Liberty Report. The Pentagon has finally completed its first ever audit, and the results are as many of us expected. After spending nearly $1 billion to find out what has happened to trillions in unaccounted for spending, the long look through the books has concluded that only 10% of all Pentagon agencies passed muster. I am surprised any of them did. Good humor from Ron Paul. Even the Pentagon is not surprised by the failure of the audit. Quote, "We failed the audit, but we never expected to pass it," unquote, said Deputy Secretary of Defense Patrick Shanahan. Can we imagine any large U.S. company subject to the prying eyes of the IRS being so unfazed by the discovery that its books have been so mishandled? As with all government programs, but especially when it comes to military spending, the failure of a program never leads to calls for funding reductions. The Pentagon's failure to properly account for the trillions of taxpayer dollars shoveled in year after year only means, they say, that we need to send more money. Already they are claiming that with more resources, meaning money, they can fix some of the problems identified by the audit. And so this is what every government bureaucrat claims, whether it's in a Department of Education, Department of Energy, Defense Department. If we had more money, more people, more resources, we could fix everything. And if you've been around Washington, D.C., lived here for a while, or have friends who live here, and they're actually honest and objective about this, you know that them making that excuse is just not true. It's like telling people that the DMV can be fixed by hiring a couple extra employees or doubling the budget. I don't think the problems with the DMV or other government agencies can be fixed. Well, the funny thing is, I don't know if I should be talking about this. This isn't investing in the economy, but one of the main reasons a lot of people think for 9/11 is because the Pentagon had unaccounted for trillions of dollars, and a lot of people think, and I think there's some reasonable evidence there, that there was not a plane that actually hit the Pentagon in D.C. So a lot of people think it was explosives that took out like the accounting areas, the accounting offices, and blew up the books. But you know what? The amount of no one cares anymore, or most people don't even care. So the amount of government spending on military stuff has exploded. And then look at the $21 trillion or more now that Catherine Austin Fitts. And the economics professor from the Michigan State University are saying is gone. Hey, Lewis, good to see you. I haven't seen you comment on here. What was a mug? So I want to thank the handful of people that donated here in the Super Chat. Mandingo Warrior, thank you. Benjamin Brasford, thank you. I will take a look really quickly at some listener questions and comments. I got pretty much everything out of the way. This is going to be a lot shorter show. Couple more things real quick. So a chart that is breaking down, because I know some of you guys, this is not financial advice, trade on the short side. The iShares iBox investment grade corporate bond ETF, so liquid. Lisa, Q as in Qdoba, like the Chipotle Mexican restaurant, and then D as in David. The chart on that is starting to break down. Year to date, it was at 120 and it's at 111, so it's starting to crack. So that's another bond one to look at besides the JNK, which is the junk bond ETF. So LQD is breaking down too. And I'm guessing that has to do probably with GE. But like I said on last night's live stream, now a lot of hedge funds are starting to look for the next GE that they can short and make a big killing on. So if there are more GEs out there, and I think there are, it's just a question of timing. I don't know if there's any companies that are in as immediate danger as GE is, but down the line over the next couple years, 5 years, 10 years, there's a lot more GEs out there. GE had just been doing the financial engineering for a lot longer, so they had a lot more debt on their balance sheet, plus GE's revenues fell. So they were carrying this mass amount of debt, and the game worked. As long as they had the revenue to cover the debt payments, they could theoretically either keep increasing the debt or maintain certain debt levels. But once their revenues fell, that was basically game over. The other stock I'm looking at that looks interesting, natural gas has had a rally, but if the global economy does crash, natural gas is looks like a bull market again. It has restarted after the sentiment was so negative. Devon Energy. So that's a stock to take a look at on your watch list, DVN. They actually have earnings. A reasonable PE ratio. The PE ratio right now is 6.56. So they're at 26 a share, and some analysts actually have a much higher stock price target than that. Don't go out and rush and go buy lots of shares of Devon, because if we have a global stock market crash, those things are going to sell off. But that looks like a quality company in an industry where the natural gas price can rise. So Devon. David, Victor, Neil. Okay, looking at listener questions and comments. Scott D's, bonds come due end of year. Let's see how they deal with that. So you're talking about Tesla. Tesla actually has big bond interest payments starting in March. So in a couple months, they actually have a couple $100 million in interest payments they have to pay. I think it's around $300 million. You'd have to look for the exact amount, either in other articles or by looking through the annual reports or quarterly reports. But they have a $300 million payment due in March, unless the convertible debentures with the interest payments, they can get those to convert to equity. And I think the strike price for those is like $360 a share, $365 a share. So if he's all in on fraud, and the CFO is all in on fraud, the new CFO, and those guys are all on board with accounting fraud, whatever it takes, then they're going to do whatever they do or say whatever it takes to move that stock above $360 a share so they don't have to make those debt payments yet. But I think in the near future, over the next couple months for sure, they're going to have to do another equity raise. I really don't think they have the cash on the balance sheet. I think that their earnings were phony. Their free cash flow was fake. I think they're in immense problems. And even if I'm wrong about that, like I said, over the next couple years, the competition is coming, which is going to really hurt their margins and be deflationary for Tesla, which is not good for them. More competition in the electric vehicle market will benefit the consumer, will not benefit Tesla. But in general, Scott, I think Tesla has a lot of debt. I think there's $8 billion in it's a massive amount of debt. And a lot of it's not from Tesla, it's from Solar City. And Elon Musk took it because his two cousins were running Solar City and there was family pressure, and he used billions of dollars in shareholder capital from Tesla and the lie he sold on the acquisition. I've talked about this a lot. I think it was very unethical what he did. But he saved his family members probably from bankruptcy, losing all their money, going to jail. Now, if he would have written a check out of his own bank accounts to do that, I would have respected him and not had a problem with it, but he used shareholder money to do it. But if we had rule of law, he would have gotten in trouble for it. Now he's not getting in trouble for it. The stock price, the funny thing is, Scott, actually, after that acquisition, a lot of shorts were adamant, like, oh, they took on debt. Oh, Solar City is a disastrous acquisition. The stock price, I think, actually tripled from when the Solar City acquisition was done. Despite all the massive debt and all the other problems with Solar City, I don't think Solar City is giving Tesla very much right now, positively. And the stock price tripled anyway. STC e-Golf, there's money laundering happening through Tesla accounting. What's the money being laundered for? The real people doing money laundering, STC eGolf, is the Chinese government. They are intentionally hyperinflating the RMB. They are the economic and political elites there. They don't care how much money and credit they create. They don't care if it gets paid back. They don't, as long as Chinese people, the poor people, don't revolt and middle class people don't revolt and have jobs, they don't care if they hyperinflate the currency, because they know that what they're doing to the inflation rate, probably what the real inflation rate is. And then they didn't work hard for that money. They just political guile. It's Cantillon effect, and they're laundering the money out of the country, if you believe Miles Kwok, at billions of dollars per day. The Chinese elites are money laundering billions of dollars per day in RMB into dollars and euros, and buying up real estate, gold, art, any other assets besides holding RMB. So let's see. I've tried to have discussions with people in the gold community and the alternative media people who believe that China is going to have a gold-backed currency about that, and they don't want to hear it. But I think there's a lot of evidence that it's true. Anecdotally, I've just heard tons of stories about crazy Chinese real estate deals all over the globe. So I think there's strong evidence that the Chinese fueled a global real estate bubble when they started the QE programs over the last 10 years and went crazy with their $50 trillion worth of RMB credit in their own country. Plus, you owe a lot of dollar-denominated debt, too, for their Chinese corporations and Chinese state-owned enterprises. But the people who are pro-China say China owes all that debt to themselves, and they'll just print the money or, waive off the loans, and it's no big deal. Jeffrey, I don't think they need Tesla to create a carbon tax. I think they need control. They need no Brexit. They need the right politicians on board. It's more about politicians on board. So not no nationalists, no Brazilian Trump, no Brexit. It's limiting the damage Trump has done to the globalist agenda. And that's what's going to allow the people to get the plan, and I'm using air quotes, back on track. I don't think Tesla has anything to do with it. Because you have European politicians now legislating that they want all electric vehicles by 2025, or almost all electric vehicles by 2025. And so the auto manufacturers, the regular car manufacturers, are all like working on mass electric vehicle adoption over the next like 10 years. So I don't think Tesla, the old saying that Doug Casey uses about pioneers in an industry is that the pioneer gets shot full of arrows. So just because Tesla was first doesn't mean they're going to be the best. What about Tesla's batteries? There's research on Hidden Forces podcast. Dimitri Kofinas, he interviews analysts and he calls it the cult of Tesla, and they talk about Tesla's IP. So there's articles about this and also other research. Mark B. Spiegel, who's a Tesla bear, he has articles about Tesla's battery technology. It's not as good as you think. I mean, Elon has made enormous amounts of promises about a battery in every home and stuff like that. It hasn't happened. Most of the predictions and promises Elon made, including the production guidance. Remember in 2017, Elon was publicly saying on all of his PR releases and his SEC filings that Tesla was going to produce 5,000 cars per week. An insane amount. And I don't even know in 2017 if Tesla produced 5,000 cars total. And the stock price didn't crash. That's a crazy thing. And so there's whistleblowers that are willing to testify that that's what the government, the Department of Justice, is actually investigating, and the FBI is the promises, the lies that Elon made about production guidance in 2017 and how egregiously lying and fraudulent that was. Yeah, most of those technology companies are fraudulent, man. A lot of them are. I mean, Twitter wasn't making money for a long time. I don't know if they are now. I haven't looked lately. Crypto Roger, no one cares about Elon. I disagree. I hear technology people, lots of them, Silicon Valley people say how great he is still. He is beloved. There's libertarian women that should be against him because he's taking tons of government subsidies with SpaceX, with Tesla, and, they defend him. Oh, he's not running a fraud. He would never do that. Oh, he's so successful. Funding secured until death. Tesla only has a valuation because it is promoted by Wall Street. Well, also Silicon Valley. Everyone, all the major players, all the rich CEOs in Silicon Valley and the executives all have a Tesla, too. It's a combination. The major power centers in the U.S. are like Washington, D.C., Wall Street, Silicon Valley, Hollywood. You have Texas oil money and Chicago. And a lot of those guys are heavily support Elon, no matter what he does for now. $389 is a breakout on the chart. Yeah, but they have to raise capital, though. So if they get around there higher, he's going to have to raise. So I don't think the chart's going to take off. They need cash in the bank, because the numbers that they're reporting, they're claiming to have all this cash on their balance sheet when they didn't pay their vendors and their suppliers. They've been withholding. They're deadbeats. Tesla is basically deadbeats. There's lawsuits. I don't know how much research you want to do into this, but they've screwed over a ton of their small suppliers in Europe that they've not paid them for a long time. And then they try to negotiate a discount. Some of them have filed for bankruptcy. Okay, guys. Well, I think that's pretty much it for this show. I don't want to do a long show. So, just wanted to get my points across there on Tesla for you guys. Were wondering that, like, he just admitted that they almost went bankrupt, and the financial statements didn't say anything like that. The financial statements said Tesla was great the whole year. They had all this cash on their balance sheet. He was promising that they were going to generate an enormous amount of net income and free cash flow in Q3 of this year. And then he does this interview, and it comes out, and instead of the stock price dropping 10 or 20% and the short saying, aha, we knew he was lying, the stock price actually does the exact opposite. Welcome to dystopia, right? So Tesla is probably just a microcosm, just the latest example of the banana republic and the fraud and the lying and the corruption and the moral bankruptcy that's happening here in the US. That's accelerating. Okay, guys, bye for now.